everybody. All right, are you ready for our first session? Our first session today is going to take you through the steps of how the combined power of individuals working together is what creates movements, how movements drive social, political, and business change, and how community is the necessary input for long-lasting movements. Our guests will discuss the power of community as the key component in driving societal progress at a moment in this world's history when we need it the most. Please welcome to our stage, Kobie Fuller and Gordon Bellamy.
Hello, CMX. How's everyone doing? Gordon, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good morning. And I just want to thank Anne-Marie and Beth and Jesse getting us here safe and sound, and the whole team at Bevy. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's exciting to be here virtually with everyone, though obviously we're not gathered in a physical space, but the power of technology like Bevy just allows the community to come together all across the world to have really important conversations, which today Gordon and I are super excited to talk about the power of community and what can it actually do to drive movements either micro or macro for societal progress. Quick background on myself. I'm a partner at Upfront Ventures, we're the largest fund in Los Angeles focusing on technology investments. And I'm also the founder of a community called Valence, which has the goal of bringing together the combined power of the global Black talent that exists on this planet to drive economic progress and just change in a way that we all know we need it the most here. Gordon, why don't you give a little background on yourself?
Sure, just real quick. I started my career designing a game called Madden Football back in the day. I spent my entire career in the game industry, and I've run both trade organizations for games, and I also helped found a community called the Gay Gaming Professionals, which helps people through education, employment, expertise, and entrepreneurship in the industry, and I teach at USC in Los Angeles.
Awesome. So I want to dive into early career. You're a seasoned games professional. I'd love you to talk about a little bit of the magic that you gave to Madden football in early days. But could you just discuss when in your career did you see that there was some sort of mission or mission-driven sort of aspect of your work that you wanted to bring forward? I'd love to just hear just how that came about.
Sure. Well, I mean, community is such a pillar of play and of games, and I think I'd come to Electronic Arts with a mission, from a community where we played to eat, like we played very seriously. And the first thing I observed was the opportunity to democratize the development community. So I got my first job by cold call, but I had the privilege of going to Harvard and access and lots of things. And there are a lot of people who were very capable of working on these titles who didn't have either the proximity or the extraordinary access to get in. So even back then, one of the first things I did that I thought was important was I went onto the listserv, which was like the internet back then, to give anyone who had the passion the opportunity to participate. Something else we did, which back in '95 was a big deal, was we put our actual personal emails in the manual so that anyone who literally had that will, like that fire, could get directly to our desk and communicate who they are, what mattered to them, why it mattered.
I think I emailed you. You didn't respond, by the
way. I apologize. But that's where it began for me, for sure. Democracy of access, right? Access to participate. I mean, that's one of the biggest things. Everyone here, works, leads, cultivates communities. And in communities, I think there's a natural progression from discovery, right, which can be the hardest part. How do you get people to discover your community, to experiencing it, right, actually getting into it, to identity, right, to I identify as a part of this community. And forever it's been important to me, and important as part of my identity to gain as much access as possible.
Got it. And I want to talk a little bit about how the community you're building, the Gay Game Professionals,
sure,
how that came about. Like, did you just wake up one day and you're like, oh, I need to do this? Or how did that happen? You just wake up, I want to drive change, because you have so much other stuff you have to do in your day job in your life to actually think about how do I drive a movement forward. So How did that come about? How did you have the ability to just get that going?
Sure. And I always want to shout out Brian Rubin, who was a founder way back when. It's always important to remember your roots. But so my personal story was this. I'd had a career about exceptionalism, right? So I worked on Madden, and we actually had our own studio called Z-Axis that we sold to Activision. And I had moved to LA and was doing biz dev. But as a queer industry, we were actually all on an anonymous mailing list. And by anonymous, I mean anonymous to each other, because there wasn't employment equity around the world. And so even knowing who each other were was to put everything at risk. And it didn't matter whether you were the president or entry level, engineering or art. We hadn't built that sort of basic trust and thus value in each other. So we used to get together once a year for an hour at a conference called GDC in San Francisco and lament. Everyone would lament their individual tales of isolation. And then finally, one year, about 15 years ago, we decided to go to a bar. Like, let's get away from all this and start to create our own community experience. Like the first experience where we freely share our names, who we are, our faces, start to actually connect in some meaningful way. The advent of Facebook took that to the next level, because we said, oh, let's actually persist secretly, mind you, all year round, and have events, whether they be in Shanghai or San Francisco or New York, that are secret. Now, 15 years later, it's great. We're a nonprofit. We're giving scholarships. We have pride, right, in who we are, because we recognize that our uniqueness is additive. But that took time, right, to go from we're trying to protect our identities and protect ourselves from each other to we're all additive. What can we do together to lift each other up?
And can you talk about like the importance of something you touched upon, like safe spaces? I feel like certain communities need to have a safe space where the community of certain people that have this common bond, having the ability to be so is important, because some people don't realize that really is important and powerful, and having that safe place it matters a ton. So I love you talking about that.
I'll rephrase that. The terminology safe space means different things, especially if you've never felt unsafe, then it doesn't have meaning. It falls weird on the ear, right? If you've never been like, what does that mean? So what I would say is this: all communities, right, all relationships have bias, and by bias I mean the questions that you navigate before you begin to be as good as you are, right? So everyone has narrowed down that journey, whether it be like someone asking you where you went to school, where are you from, what is your job title, so on and so forth. Bias, right? And so one of our goals was to create a space where people of different orientations, expressions, identities were default. So just imagine that. You're default, and now you're able to move forward professionally in discourse, rather than having to navigate qualifications of identity, expression, gender, before getting a chance to be who you are. So that would be, I think, maybe a word I would use, and maybe everyone would be comfortable with this, would be default spaces. And just being like, how many people can come into your space and feel as though they are default, and then engage with your content, your conversation, what have you.
And what's the mission for the organization? Like, what are you guys trying to accomplish? Or I guess, what would you be excited to see, call it 5 years from now, in terms of what the organization is able to do? Not maybe only for sports,
No, it speaks to purpose, right? And so for me personally, and professionally, my purpose is I love helping people get from point A to point B who don't know how. Like, and whether I use my intelligence, my connections, whatever I can use, I love helping people on those journeys. And so in terms of the organization, it really is this journey, which starts with education. So helping democratize education for people who often will get displaced from family and resources when they come out, right? Helping them navigate into employment, another place where they get displaced, get last to resources. Another thing, expertise, where getting to be showcased for your actual expertise rather than just for your identity. And then lastly, entrepreneurship, empowering ownerships of businesses, right?
Yes.
We've had many conversations about the power to affect change when you are the change maker versus the key influencer, right?
Yes.
And so the more people that we can drive towards change making, the better. Those are the mission points. Those are the KPI that I see.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things you touched upon is, being a change maker or a change agent. Do you have any guidance or words of wisdom for anyone listening today that has some sort of little tickle in their belly around wanting to be a change agent in some manner, some way? Or it's I don't know, do I really matter? I'm just one human on this planet of billions of people. I'm curious any thoughts you have around that.
No, absolutely. And we're going to flip this on you because you are a change maker, and we're going to talk about Valence in a second. But I would say a couple things. The number one thing, and this is something which is especially relevant today, and someone said it to me, and when I finally heard it, it really stuck with me, which was there's a difference between waiting on the world to act on you and acting on the world. Okay. Right now, there's a lot of things extrinsically that many of us have very little control over, direct impact over, right? And it's easy to get lost in the way that the world is acting on you and not really laser focus on how you can act on the world in a meaningful way. For me, I find real peace in that. Heck, even being here in this conference, right? In this moment with all of you, with other community leaders, and knowing that hopefully we'll all connect. And do we have all the contact info? I'll just shout it out. I'm on Twitter, Gordon Bellamy. I'm on Instagram, Cyber Cooper. You have me on Facebook, LinkedIn. Add me. Let's just get into it. That's awesome because you're here. But making those choices to act on the world in the way that you can in measurable ways every day, it's it's the same as working out, right? If you want to get in shape, you hang out with people who go to the gym, not people going, to the fast food place, right? And you'll cumulatively make progress in a meaningful way. Other bits of advice. Yeah, I do think the people with whom you spend your time, right, who are challenging you and lifting you up, it's super meaningful, especially nowadays, to have personal, professional spaces where you're able to iterate on ideas and concepts to move forward, to workshop before you go out into the world with things. Mentorship, in a nutshell, super important. But let me ask you the same question, because I wouldn't be here without you. You've been a change maker in my life, right? With Wave, in this industry, in this conference, this moment. Maybe talk a little bit about Valence, which affects so many of us in a positive way, and what inspired you transformatively to make not just an economic change, but systemic change.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're trying with Valence. We'll see how far we can go, but we have really big aspirations, big goals. And it goes to a little bit of what you said. How can I, in the capabilities and resources I have, try to affect change on this world in areas where I feel like things were broken? And it's about 2 years ago where I saw that things were broken, where in the corporate setting, seeing companies saying they wanted to hire more Black professionals or put more Black people on boards or fund more Black founders, but constantly saying the statement, I have no idea where to find them. It's a pipeline issue. People they're not there. And Gordon, you and I know that's totally not the case. So I realized, well, what can I actually do to help solve this problem? I could just point at them and say, hey, you guys are stupid, work harder, or I could try to solve their problem. I could actually put the solution in front of their face and be like, hey, what's your excuse? So part of the idea was, let's create an interactive database of Black talent and celebrate the talent on this database through this lens, this branding lens. And we use superheroes where people within the Black professional universe who, for some reason or another, were not looked up to like a LeBron James or like a Robert Smith. Like, white people don't have no idea who he is, but someone like Robert Smith should be known by a lot of the people on this planet. Maybe now he is because he get with money too, Morehouse grads and the likes. But where I'm trying to go to is, let me try to actually create a solution through just this product that I was building on the side. I have a full-time job. I got 2 kids. I don't got no time. But I realized if I want to actually see the problem go away, I got to do something or shut up. So as I was building this website, I got all this feedback from corporations, other VCs that they actually want to pay for this platform or fund the platform. And I realized, wait a minute, I'm a VC. I could fund my own platform if I want to, put $1 million into it out of Upfront's capital, and really appreciate the support of my partners to be on the mission for this, and start building out a small team, iterating on the idea, and it came to be a community. The idea was, instead of actually creating just a platform to solve the problem of these corporations and these venture funds who are trying to deploy capital and hire people, there was an issue with regards to the Black community being siloed, not connected together, not actually leveraging the combined power of each other to actually accomplish and achieve progress. Where for some reason we're in these micro communities, these silos, these ERGs, these alumni associations. Why can't I actually create bridges across all these organizations so that we actually could affect change together? So I was trying to apply technology to the problem, and emotion, inspiration, branding, storytelling, and it just resonated. We launched it about a year ago this time, and had with no marketing, 3,000 people pretty much out of the gate wanting to be on this platform. So we kind of hit a nerve with regards to what we're trying to do here. But I'll be honest with you, there is periods as recent as early this year where I wondered, like, how many people truly still cared about this mission? Do people, if they saw a pool of Black people in front of them, would they want to hire them? Like, do they actually care about Valence in terms of existence? Like, how am I going to get this thing funded? Like, I can't keep going into the piggy bank of Upfront and keep financing this thing. And then everything really just changed come George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, and there was just this macro movement, this meteor just hit this planet with the guards. Like, wow, like there's a lot of things that are broken, and now we're in this position because we've been prepared for this moment. In our small micro community, I still think of, in terms of 11,000 people right now, could be the seed of something bigger to do something. So we're in the beginning phases there, but for me personally, it was one where I didn't wake up thinking like, oh, I want to build a community. I want to build a movement. I want to try to actually solve a lot of the inequities of this country with regards to just racial disparities. But I just saw this moment in time where I was in the right place, right time, with the right idea, and honestly, it felt like a calling to do, and that's kind of where we are right now. So it's I almost feel like a burden. I feel like I have an idea of a burden and I have to do it. And I'm so excited that we're on this mission, and Gordon, you're on this mission with us because this is a community-driven experience that we're trying to drive forward.
Sure. No, it's super meaningful, and I'll just sort of bring everyone in a bit. That I won't speak to your experience. I'll speak to mine. So the word that through all the thread of what you spoke to is pride, right? And so I actually grew up with like, I'm Black and I'm proud. I grew up with Black is beautiful. And now we're in a different time where the password answer was Black Lives Matter. There's a voyage. Once again, everyone's experience is different, but this is coming out month, right? In October, and in June is Pride. And for me, coming out month isn't just about identity or gender or expression. It's about that realization of who you are as an affirmation, and then being like, hey, are you on board with me or not? So that could be around you as investmentally, like you had a coming out moment. You're like, wait a second, I am not only an investor in other properties, I'm an investor in community, right? You had to come out and be like, tell everyone up and down the hallway, this is who I am. And what is so powerful about that is that what that is given a community is the affordance of pride. And by pride, I mean this. Part of the value of the community you've created is that it isn't just that people are exceptional. It is that they, for many, for the first time in a minute, have seen their trait, their identity, as additive, right?
Mm-hmm.
Additive to the collective melting pot. So once again, the Valence experience for me is not about despite your Blackness, we're going to recruit you. Look, you've been curated by Valence. It is, look at these 11,000 and counting. It's like the beginning of the Warriors. Like, if you can count, right? There's a whole generation of people. Look around to the left of you, to the right of you, right? And that builds worth. And I think everyone who works in communities, understands and appreciates that in that identity moment, right? When people go from experiencing something to actually a shared identity and a positive identity, like your community, like many of the communities out there, that is an incredible, empowering, unifying feeling.
Yes.
Going forward. And it did, once again, just thank you, right? And I understand it must be a challenge because, like people who are often marginalized, people question the value of marginalized people, right? Like, but why? Why would you aggregate, people of color? I mean, right?
Yeah.
Meritocracy or whatever, right? But then when you go, oh no, people of color are innately additive, that's why it's a plus, right? And
Yeah.
and when you say black and then something positive happens afterwards, then woo, like that's powerful history and value being built. And that's something that everyone does with their communities for the most part, is that they try to have positive things happen after being associated with the community, right?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the work we all share, whether it be we talk a lot in games about the aesthetics of play and aesthetics of fun, and those could be like fellowship, right? Like the fellowship of the 11,000 Bales. It could be learning, like all the resources that you pour into it. It can be competition. We're the best at this, that, and the other. It could also be cooperation. Look, Susie, Sarah, Joe, and Dana together, right?
Yeah.
Are a fantastic four. Who knew? And
Yeah.
you're giving birth to a lot of aesthetics of play through the community you're building. And I'm sure a lot of people out there in the crowd are as well.
Yeah. And the one thing that I think communities that operate really well operate in a manner where everyone wins together. So they may be winners within the community, but everyone wins. You still celebrate someone's win within the community, and it doesn't become crabs in a barrel. It's become, like Gordon just like is now special on the superstar.
Kobie,
like, why is that
inside
not
baseball.
Me? No.
For everyone at home, crabs in a barrel. Sorry, it's asterisk. See comic 87 African American culture. The concept is this: is that when you boil crabs, if you're a crab boiling person, then you might go, why don't the crabs ever crawl out of the barrel if you leave it open, right? Why don't they get away? And it is because through some sort of instinct or another, the crabs in the pot will actually grab the crabs that are trying to get out of the pot and pull them back into the boiling water. Ew, awkward, when applied to talk about humankind. But you're right. We have an opportunity to lift each other up in a meaningful way. I'll tell you something. We'll talk to the crowd because I saw Doug Scott was here from Twitch. Actually, weird flex, bro, making the Twitch homepage debut on Sunday for Coming Out Day. I'm here with the world's best community leaders. I'll be super honest. Never been on the front page of Twitch before. I'm sort of excited, but all guidance, welcome from the finest community leaders in the world of how we can move our message forward. This is a conversation, right? Community conversation. I welcome it. That's my question to all of you: how to make the most of this opportunity on Sunday. Anyway,
well, maybe that's actually a good segue to open up questions to the audience, because we are a community and it's not just you and I chatting. So maybe we can start shifting gears there. If Beth wants to come back on.
If Beth is there. Well, in the meanwhile, I'll just give my contact info again, because conversation can be asymmetrical. This actually isn't the format for some people who aren't necessarily direct communicators. Like if they're thoughtful or quiet, they may want to do something more chill. So LinkedIn, Twitter, add me, Gordon Bellamy. Kobie Fuller's right here.
I'm Kobie Fuller.
Add Kobie on LinkedIn. Real talk. Like real talk. Type it in Kobie. Just do it. Trust me on this one.
Well, gentlemen, this was such an inspiring way to start our day. Our chat has been blowing up with so much positivity.
I want to see it all.
Excitement. It's so wonderful. Thank you so much. We do have lots of questions, and I'm excited that our Q&A feature is just like working so perfectly right now.
Let's go.
Let's begin. Okay, so you talked about the default spaces and everybody loved that. I would love if you could talk more about how you managed to kind of take those identities that are unfortunately seen as the other and then bring them into that default space and create that default space.
Sure. There's a couple ways. One is I will over-index for underrepresented or misrepresented communities. So, for example, even in queer spaces, often those are dominated by cisgender male people. And so we made a point to give early access to non-gender conforming, non-binary, and trans members of our community. The second thing, which I think is super important, is we had people who were greeters throughout the night who I call them, they scrub the walls with love. And most importantly, asking non-qualifying questions. Like, so a non-qualifying question is a question anyone can answer and engage with, like, who inspired you to get into games, right? Why do games matter to you? A qualifying question is, what is your job title? Okay, where did you go to school, right? The questions you ask that you use to differentiate and delineate and rank people. Like, if you begin with those questions, you put people on their heels immediately, right? Before they get a chance to engage with you. So the more questions that enable engagement and equity and inclusion set the tone for how people feel. And if you've ever, once again, been marginalized over anything, then you know the questions. Like, if people ask you, what side of town are you from, right? Whatever, so on and so forth. Everyone knows when they're doing it, what they're doing.
Yeah.
More questions. That's just definitely a basic thing. There's lots of things. But
yeah, no, that's awesome. Okay, next one here. So Priya asks, building trust is so important to create a safe community. Any tips that you feel helped you build trust in the community for your members?
Wow, that's a great question. Trust is a two-way street, right? So trust begins with listening, right? Like, that's where trust begins, really. Because until you listen, you don't even know what you're trusting. I'll tell you why trust is super important, though. So concentric circles for everyone home, to me. So trust, then loyalty, then goodness, right? And by that I mean, you can have, if you go for goodness, excellence, without trust and loyalty, well, then you won't even know when it's falling apart, because they won't tell you, because there's no trust and loyalty, right? If you have trust but no loyalty, they'll tell you, God, I got the worst news, but nothing you can do about it. I just want to tell you to your face. When you have trust and loyalty, you're able to iterate on goodness, right? You're able to navigate the bugs. You're able to navigate the hiccups in community, right, together, because you all know that you're working from the best of intentions, right? You're all headed in the same direction. You're just in some choppy water together. So that's why trust. Building trust. I think, you got to listen, because trust is a gift that people have to be willing to give you. You can't extract it from people.
Yeah. And how I think about that too, there can't be trust if, first and foremost, there's not transparency. If I don't truly know who my fellow community member is, then how can I truly trust them? And when you're interacting with someone and then there's a wall up, there's a guard up, there's just something that they're not sharing with you. And that's when people actually usually put barriers up between them and other people. They don't trust one another. And then when you do have transparency on top of that, then there needs to be some level of just shared commitment towards why you're there in this community. Like, what is the purpose by which you're actually in the same space with them? And then are you holding each other accountable with regards to, like, are you actually acting in the ways in which you should be acting to be a part of this community? And when there's a dynamic where people are being their authentic selves, they're holding each other accountable, they're holding that commitment towards one another, then there becomes this really clear bond where we will trust one another, we'll share things with one another because I am there for my fellow community member and we're going to be building together. So that's how I think about how you build trust, but it doesn't happen overnight, clearly. It becomes earned with so many people. But if you don't have those key components, I feel like it all breaks down.
Yeah, I want to build on Kobie real quick and just say, identifying what positive behaviors are for community is super important. It's a lot of energy can be spent around, like, punishment metrics. Like, if you do this, then I'm going to break up with you in our community, and not as much energy in some communities around these are the positive traits that we actually are trying to affirm and celebrating them. But I think those are like investments. Like, in a relationship, it's like there's deposits and withdrawals, and the more deposits you give people a chance to give, right, the more trust there'll be when something is even perceived to be a withdrawal. Like, you give yourself more leeway to work it out. But if you don't have those deposits, if someone on the street just bumps into you, you might be like, why are you bumping into me? Are you a pickpocket? Whatever, right? Like, why are you so inconsiderate of my time? But if someone you know, right, who's built trust with you or, is of good intentions, bumps into you, well, then you come from a different place with the same exact interaction. That crossed with hundreds, thousands, millions is community.
That's right.
I love that. That's a great way of putting community. Okay, so we don't really have time, but I'm gonna ask one more question. Gordon, overwhelmingly, everybody wants to know what the story about your shirt.
Oh, okay. So real talk. Okay, so I play recreational dodgeball. Okay, I'm a dodgeballer, and so I actually play in a tournament in Las Vegas. And my team, Claw and Order, oh my God, shout out to Andrew Ketchum, the world's best dodgeball player on my team, by the way. Like MVP of Worlds. Like, anyway, back to me. The way you get this shirt is this. You have to make a double catch, which is catching 2 balls at the same time in a match, like live play. You have to have video of it, and then you submit it to a website. If they approve of the video as legit in play, in legitimate tournament play, only then can you earn the Catch Champion t-shirt. So yes, me in Vegas, double catch, I did, it was a fine moment. It's actually a 3-on-1 too, so like if everyone loves dodgeball real quick, a 3-on-1, I caught the 2 balls, of course, spiked them because what? And then 2 of my teammates came in and it was a reverse 3-on-1 and it was just like chef's kiss. Community and sorry, wait, a community that I'm very proud of, right? Like, especially in these displaced times, like I am a dodgeballer. Even if we don't get to play right now, we will be back. Join your local dodgeball league. Consider it.
That's so fantastic. Thank you for that, Gordon. Thank you so much, Kobie. Everybody in the chat is also wondering if you'll hop into a networking table at some point today. So you can think about that. And we're going to move on to our next session. Thank you so much, gentlemen.